What's going on, guys? It's Seth back again with another episode of DWF Defense Wins Fantasy, part of the Fantasy Holics Podcast Network. If you guys hadn't noticed, we added an extra podcast last week. It's the Flex, and it's pretty good. It's redraft league. So we've been talking about Dynasty because Dynasty's year round, but we're getting into July, and it's time to focus on the redraft leagues as well. So we got Josh and AJ over there that are really holding it down. They've got some really good content. I've enjoyed listening to them on my Thursday morning. So it releases Thursday morning, and you guys need to check that out. It's really solid. We still got the Fat Boys Dynasty going strong. They're going to start with their divisional breakdowns starting next week, I believe. But we're going to continue on our divisional breakdowns here on Defense Wins Fantasy. We are now moving over to the AFC after we did all the NFC in the prior weeks, and we did the mock draft last week. If you haven't listened to that episode, give it a listen. It's a little longer, but we did a 3-round IDP mock draft that's pushed the value of the players a little bit more evenly, as I've spoke about a lot of times in my podcast. But it got me thinking about positional scarcity and why it matters. So really, there's a lot of important things. Another kind of Seth's secret that I wanted to take a little bit of time and focus on is you really need to understand the point values and the scoring of your league, but also understand how many players you start and how that's going to impact your positional scarcity. So what I mean by that is you can go onto your platform, and I did our scoring. It is a little bit probably more exaggerated, I will say that, for one of the leagues that I pulled the information from, because we have, yardage bonuses and things like that. But I wanted to just kind of, and it'll kind of inflate some of these point per game differences between them. But I wanted to make sure that kind of it really sold the point home. So I use this exaggerated scoring. So if you look at you go to your scoring page and you look at your quarterbacks and you look at last year's scoring, from QB1 to QB20, normally, 24, however many they put on a page. But I went QB1 to QB20. There was a 245-point differential from QB1 to QB20. Now, that's a separation of 14 points per game. So if you look at that, you're like, holy cow, man, getting 14 extra points a game is really impactful. But, you and I know as well, we're not playing 20 quarterbacks. We're not talking about a super flex. We're just talking about a single QB league. So we're only talking about 1 through 12. So if you've got 1 through 12, we're talking about 182 different points. From number 1 to number 12, there was a 182-point discrepancy. And that gives you basically a 10.7-point advantage per week. Not bad, pretty good. So that's what you're looking at. But positional scarcity matters because it went from 14 to 10 because we're only playing those 12 players. So you have to make sure that you compare that correctly across all the boards. That's why a lot of people say that we need to wait on quarterback because it's not as valuable. If you don't get one of those guys that ends in the top 2, then your positional scarcity is, or the variation is even more condensed in between there because you always have a couple outliers that are much higher than the rest of the pack. So when you wait on quarterback, if you're grabbing number 4 or you're grabbing number 12, you might be losing 1 to 2, maybe at most 4 points a game in that position. But what you would gain in other positions is what I wanted to look at as well. And we're going to go through all offense and defense on this because we are an IDP podcast. So with running backs, 1 through 12 had a 192-point discrepancy. So that's good for 11.2 points per game. So already, if you're starting one running back, it's more valuable than the quarterback is at the 10.7 per game versus 11.2 for running backs per game. But you and I both know that in most leagues you start 2, and it could even have a flex. But for easy basis, I went with 2. So you're really talking about player 1 and player 24 of the last year. And there was a 241-point disparity between the two of them, which is good for 14 points per game. Moving on to wide receivers, 1 through 24, there was a 257-point disparity for a 15-point per game average, albeit that one has an anomaly named Cooper Kupp in it because he just had a year of the ages, really, across the board. So we take him out, And that 257 becomes a 150-point disparity. Yes, in our league, he scored 107 more points than the next highest wide receiver. Insane, I know. And no, the guy that had him did not win the league. But 150 points difference between 1 and 24. 8.8 points per game that we're talking about. But then we start looking at tight end. We have to go back to 1 to 12 because very few leagues that I know of start 2 tight ends. Why would you want to do that? 190-point disparity between 1 and 12. That's 11 points per game. That's why taking Kelsey in the first round happens a lot, because it's worth it. That variation is the second highest behind running back that you're going to get. And then we start talking about defense. So we look at the D ends. Okay, so if you're starting two defensive ends, that's what I went with. Or even if it's D lineman, it's about the same. It's 133 difference between 1 and 24, which is a 7.8 point per game advantage that you would have by having a higher ranked or the top ranked defensive end. Defensive tackle, I separated this one out because I wanted to see what Aaron Donald kind of situation was, but it's not just Aaron Donald that was an absolute monster. Hayward off of Pittsburgh had an absolutely monstrous season as well. Those two were far and away above everybody else. Yeah, Cameron Hayward, just a fantastic year. That's why he keeps talking about how he's just on the same level as Donald. Do a couple more years like that and we'll see. But he is very, very talented. But with that being said, you have one of those big names at the top and you're getting 12.5 points per game positional advantage. So having that value at that position, if your league does D tackles, having that top end is significant for having that advantage against everybody. Now we're talking about a 70-point drop-off after those top two guys. So that positional advantage is not going to be as strong. But if you play in a league that has some solid scoring, or just take a look at it just like this and see what that point per game differential is between those top guys, they might not think that, it's that valuable, but everybody has to start a position and you want to try to have more pluses than minuses when it comes down to it. Now we look at linebackers, which are starting 1 through 36. And I know, because most leagues start like 3 linebackers, because there's a lot of them. Well, but 1 through 36, that disparity must be astronomical. So I kind of thought. 160-point difference from 1 to 36 for a 9.5 point per game advantage. Very interesting that they're very much more in the middle. You have more guys on the field all the time, and it's reactionary rather than, plays set up for them. So if they're on the field and they're getting opportunities, they're going to have more points. So there's just more of a cluster of good talent out there. Then you look at cornerbacks. Okay, well, yeah, but there's some really good corners and there's some that aren't. 6 points per game separation between 1 and 24. Safeties. I preach safeties. Tackle safeties are important. 4 points per game difference between 1 and 24. I'm going to be honest, this is something that I haven't really looked at before, and it gave me a little bit of a shock because even with our evened out scoring metric, offense is still more important. Outside of the complete outlier that is top defensive tackle players, it's very, very interesting to kind of take a step back, look at how scoring matters, but also understanding it. So what I want you to now look at is what's more important. You have a 4-point disparity on your safeties, but that's players that have boom weeks and then no-show weeks, and then there's the players that get the same amount of points every kind of week. Call me crazy, but I'd rather have the consistency. I'd rather have the guy that's going to get the tackles rather than a guy that maybe gets 5 picks but has 3 games where he just ghosts you and he doesn't show up at all. So that's where you can start looking at the value between consistency and boom or bust guys, and maybe kind of mix it in a little bit with your teams. It's something that you just kind of have to understand. But when you're really looking at players and your scarcity, you need to understand that each position can get you more points on a plus-minus scale. But how many points are you going to get versus how many points are you giving up when you're looking at trades is very important. And it's something to definitely take into effect when you're working on trades or you're looking at draft capital. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive into the AFC South tonight. And I want to start off with the Indianapolis Colts. We're going to start off, once again, we're going to do bust, breakouts, and players to watch. Your bust player, obviously, that kind of is a guy that I don't think is going to perform, at least not at the level that he did last year. Breakouts is somebody that I think is going to take that next step. And a player to watch can go a lot of different ways for me. It's somebody that I'm not really sold on yet, or I'm a little bit cautious about how they were before. Maybe they're going to kind of teeter off, but I kind of want to wait and see. Or it's a guy that I think that, hey, you might want to get this guy going. I'm not 100% confident that he's going to be able to do it, but I would bet on it rather than not. So starting with the bust player with the Indianapolis Colts is Yannick Ngakoue, defensive end that they just traded out of the Raiders. Yannick's career is quickly turning into the career that could have been, in my opinion. He's been on 5 teams since 2019. 5 teams in 2019. We're just about to start the 2020 season. It's a far cry from the potentially flash when he was in Jacksonville. Now, that being said, he is coming off a 10-sack season in Las Vegas. And having a 10-sack pretty good season, the Raiders quickly traded him after signing Chandler Jones. They think that the risk is better served with a possibly aged-out veteran that'll take Yannick's spot across from Max Crosby rather than keep Yannick, who they had under contract. That kind of is a red flag to me because it's also been what's happened everywhere else. They've moved him, or he's refused to play and wanted to be moved. He seems like he's a diva in the locker room. He doesn't seem like he's a team player. And although he's going to get to play next to DeForest Buckner and across from Kwity Paye, I just think he's going to underwhelm. And I think he's going to leave owners stuck out and wondering what happened. I just think they're going to be out to dry eventually on this. So what do you do? What do you do right now? He got traded again. He's on a different team again, but he's coming off a 10-sack season. Go out to your league, find the Colts fan. He's going to be the one that has a bottle of Andrew Luck's tears around his neck. And if there's a guy that's a little bit hopeful about his defensive prowess, trade Yannick Ngakoue while you still can, okay? Get him off your team. Now, my breakout player for the Colts is Julian Blackmon. He's a safety. Word of warning first on him. Blackman's coming off a torn Achilles from last October, but he's already been taking part in positional drills this offseason, and they say that he's looking pretty good and he's ahead of schedule. That being said, with the surprise retirement of Khari Willis this offseason, Blackman's posed to become the top safety on this team. Top safety in the fantasy landscape is also in the realm of possibility. Last year, Blackmon was on pace for 116 tackles and 4 sacks. The defense is set up for safety to succeed. Khari Willis came right in and took over for Blackmon and saw the same level of success. He's a guy that, because he's coming off an injury, they might be a little bit low on him. He might be out in your waiver wire still. So trade for him now, as the owners are probably worried about the injury and recovery, and you could probably get him on the cheap. Once again, that name is Julian Blackmon, safety for the Colts. Also, a shameless plug for Nick Cross, rookie safety / cornerback. If Blackmon has any setbacks, keep your eyes on this guy. I think Cross has the ability to be very successful in this league. They still haven't really determined where he's going to play in the defense, so keep an eye on the preseason, see where Nick Cross is playing, because if Blackmon does stumble, Cross could come in as a rookie and really set the league on fire. My player to watch for the Colts is Kenny Moore, cornerback. This one defies my cornerback logic that I've spoke of before. Past 4 years, he's racked up 320 tackles in 4 years. Last year had 102 tackles. So he's a tackle hoss, Seth. During that same span, he's had 13 interceptions and 7 sacks. Past 3 years, his points per game has increased, with Rock Ya-Sin leaving town and the Yannick Ngakoue trade. I'm unsure if this helps or hurts more. I'm not 100% sure how this is going to go. They did pick up Stephon Gilmore. He's in town now, so at this point in Gilmore's career? Is he still a cornerback that quarterbacks avoid throwing to? I personally don't think so. I think he's on the downgrade, so they're not going to be as scared as they used to be to throw to him. And another concern with Kenny Moore is that he's 26 in the prime of the quarterback age range that I've spoken about, the time when opposing QBs start to avoid good cornerbacks. So if they're not going to throw it to Kenny Moore and they're willing to throw it to Stephon Gilmore, you're going to get less opportunities to get that tackle percentage up, the pass defended percentages, the interception percentages. You still have the opportunity with the sacks based on how the schemes are set up, but there is a concern for some drop-off. That being said, he's done it year after year after year after year, and he's stayed in the realm of availability on the field and capability in the fantasy realm. So he's just a bit of an anomaly. He's a tough code for me to crack personally, but at this point in time, I'd rather have him on my team than not. Plain and simple. I'd even have him on my team if it was DB position, where you don't separate the corners and safeties. I think he's that good, and I think that he is putting up points that's going to be that good. So that being said, once again, that was Kenny Moore, the cornerback for the Indianapolis Colts, and we're going to go ahead and move on to the Houston Texans. The bust player that I have, man, I didn't do myself any favors with some of these names tonight, is Kamu Grugier-Hill. Last year, he was a defensive darling, but he could be relegated to a backup role this year. They drafted Christian Harris in the 3rd round, and he's already been running with the first teams a lot. There's a chance that Hill keeps his starting role as the inside linebacker, but he only signed a 1-year, $4 million deal after the 2021 season coming into 2022. And before his 2021 breakout, the most tackles he had in the season was 45, and that was back in 2018. The story with Camus is one of those things, he's on a team that's lacking talent and that they had to have a player step up and become valuable. And that's what he did. That's what Hill did. But that value is very easily replaceable. I like him. I think it's a great story. I think he's a hard worker, but I think that he's not going to have the talent to maintain the level of production that he's had. And I think that he's not going to get the field time. Once again, though, it depends on where do they decide to play Christian Harris and what they want to do with that defense. If they start saying, you know what, Harris maybe is going to be an outside linebacker in this defense, then great. Maybe Hill still has an opportunity. And with Lovie Smith coming in, he was the D coordinator last year, but was he able to actually put in his defense, or was he still going off the head coach's defense and he wants to put in his this year? Time will find out, but I would lean towards Hill not repeating much more than I would towards him being a breakout at 28 years old. Speaking of breakouts, my breakout player, I've talked about him a few times. It's Derek Stingley Jr., cornerback, drafted number 3 overall in this year's draft. He's got strong press man coverage ability. He's a corner that has great ball skills. Early in his career, he'll be picked on by opposing quarterbacks like every cornerback does. This will boost his tackle numbers, boost his interception opportunities, boost his deflected passes opportunities. Biggest concern with him, and I've made no secret about it, is his health. Stingley struggles to stay healthy in the past 2 collegiate seasons, and the strategy with corners that I hold myself to is you grab high draft capital guys and use them for the first few years before they earn the quarterback's respect. Then trade them out because they still have a high name value because they were early draft picks, and they also have high production value at that point in time. Stingley could easily lead the rookie class in fantasy points at the cornerback position and make a name for himself early on in his career. I expect him to get picked on early and often, and I expect him to be productive for fantasy because of it. My player to watch is Malik Collins, defensive tackle. Now, Malik's coming off one of the best years he's had in the NFL. And he's a D tackle in a division with Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, and James Robinson. I know James Robinson's hurt now, but still. Tackles should be coming early and often in the middle of this defense. They're going to run it up the gut with Henry and Jonathan Taylor, possibly with Robinson on the second matchup that they have in the year. And he's never been a big sack guy, but he's got enough talent to get to the quarterback. He can get there and has gotten there, but it's not his primary focus. His primary focus is run stuffing. The focus on him will be in leagues that separate D end and D tackle, leagues that give tackle bonuses to D linemen. Second year with Lovie Smith defense means it could do wonders for Malik Collins. I think that he's a guy that was really good with the Cowboys, had a fall-off year where he didn't really do a lot, and then came into the Texans and has blossomed again. And I think that he's a guy that's going to be very valuable, very consistent player on your team. Now, the Jaguars are the next team up. Bust pick, Trayvon Walker. Once again, I don't hate the player. I just know that he's raw. And if you're going to draft a first-round, first overall pick onto your team in fantasy, you're going to expect to have production immediately. And that might not be the case with him. It's going to take some time before he's a stud pass rusher. He's a solid run defender, which will keep him on the field now, which is great. Plus, he is linebacker D-line eligible in a lot of leagues, so that is a little bit of a boost. But I don't think he's going to get the tackles to make me willing to put him in a linebacker position, and I don't think that he's going to have enough tackles to put him in the D-line position that's going to make me feel valuable over a guy that might be a little bit better at the sack prowess. He has a chance to have a high floor of tackles, but I don't see that happening this year. Short-term value is weak. Long-term value is a lot brighter. But if we're talking about a bust where you're going to have to get him in your rookie drafts or just I wouldn't even touch him in a redraft league, but in rookie dynasty drafts or dynasty startup drafts, he's going to go a lot higher than I'd be comfortable with. Now, the breakout player is Devin Lloyd, another first-round draft pick, middle linebacker. He's one of the most complete linebackers in this draft class. His ball skills are great. His instincts are strong. Coverage is extremely impressive. His biggest weakness is shedding blocks, which could get him into trouble in the NFL. But he has shown flashes of being able to do it. He just needs to improve on it. Focusing on this, having coaches that will help him with that, I think that he'll do fine. He's a 3-down linebacker that has great hands and can rush the passer. So you have the ability to get the tackles. You have the ability to get interceptions and big plays. You have the ability to get sacks and big plays that way. He has a lot of opportunity to come into the league and be extremely exceptional right off the bat. I expect over 115 tackles in his rookie year. Add in some pass defenses and a couple sacks. Should be a top 15 linebacker in year one. Speaking of linebackers, we just talked about Devin Lloyd, and now we're going to go talk to Foyesade Olokin. Once again, I'm just picking the greatest names, but the show must go on, and these are the guys we need to talk about. Olokin had 192 tackles last year, but that was on the Falcons. Moving schemes from the Falcons to the Jaguars will take an impact. Jags also drafted Devin Lloyd in the first round, which I just talked about. They also drafted Chad Munoz in the third round. 192 tackles will be difficult to repeat for any player, let alone one that is going to be moving to a new defensive scheme. That defensive scheme is not set up to be as focused on the middle linebackers tackling as the scheme he came from. Good news is, though, they paid him big money to come to Jacksonville. I think 3 years, $45 million. Bad news is Damian Wilson, who left the Jaguars, had 106 tackles last year. Miles Jack also left Jacksonville, had 108 tackles last year. Neither were near 192 tackles that Olokin had the previous year. Still, it's a solid play, but with Devin Lloyd playing beside him, I see his value dropping significantly off of his pace from last year. The defensive coordinator also comes from the Buccaneers. The two middle linebackers for the Bucs in the last few years have barely gotten over, one of them over 100 tackles a year, and the other one had 120 tackles each of the last 2 years. It's a far cry for 192. He's not what I would call a bust, but he might not be what he was in Atlanta. And so you really need to look at your roster And if there's somebody that's willing to pay for him because of what he did last year, and you can enhance your team somewhere else and you're good enough to have some other linebackers, maybe not guys that are getting 192 tackles, but you don't have one on your team that is getting 192 tackles this year, he's not going to do it. So look at the possibility of getting something back. So maybe a position you need better, more, even out your roster, balance it out. The opportunities are there. I'm not going to say he's going to be a bust. I think he's going to be a fine linebacker, but he's not going to do what he did last year for your team. No way. Next team, Tennessee Titans. Final team. Now this one, they've had a lot of turnover on the defensive side, especially in the linebackers room, and the corners have been injured / coming back. It's a little bit tumultuous for sure. But the guy that I looked at is Danico Autry for the bus player, defensive end. Autry's coming off a 9.5 sack season. He's a player at first glance. It seems like a solid player to have on your team. Maybe not your every week starter, but here's your bye week fill-in, or he's your second DN, third DN, D lineman on your team. Biggest flaw with him, insane swings in production. What do I mean by that? He had 9.5 sacks last year. It's pretty good, for a D lineman. Not a well-known big-name D lineman, a guy that's going to be valuable for me. Listen, he had 7 games last year. Once again, 7 games last year with 1 tackle or less to his name. 7. The end of the year stats look like a worthwhile investment, but you break it down, it ain't. Don't be fooled by this mirage. He will hurt your team more than he helps. Let somebody else put him in there and wonder what happened and why he's getting goose-egged or why he's getting a point to 2 points for a week. That's trash, man. Get some consistency there. We already talked about the variability of the top guy to the bottom is 7.8 points from 1 to 24. But if you got a guy that's putting up maybe 30 points 1 week and then 3 weeks of 1 to 2 points, no thanks. I am not on that train. That is not something that I'm willing to put my team through. Absolutely not. So stay away from Autry. Encourage your opponents to pick him up. Hey, be like, hey, man, this guy had like 9.5 sacks last year. It's pretty good. Just maybe pick him up. And then just pray you don't get lined up on him when he has that 2-sack game. Now, my breakout player for the Tennessee Titans is Zach Cunningham, linebacker, formerly of the Houston Texans. Got cut last year, mid-season, from the Houston Texans after basically being benched and not even active for part of the season. There was a big fallout in Houston. The relationship extremely soured. Soured probably isn't even the right word for it. It's the kindest word for it, but it was absolutely terrible. He came right over, though, after he got cut. They picked up his contract, salary and all, put him into the lineup, and he averaged 6.5 tackles a game. Talent's there with Zach Cunningham. The Titans, what really, really sparked me on looking at him as a breakout, because I'm going to be honest with you, I came in to looking at this, being ready to prepared to talk to you guys about Zach Cunningham being the bust pick for the Tennessee Titans. And I couldn't do it because there's too many signs that says that they believe in him, that they trust him, and that he's going to be a valuable asset to this defense. Once again, came right over into the playoffs and in the end of the season and averaged 6.5 tackles a game, barely knowing the scheme. The Titans then moved on from Rashaan Evans, let him leave town to go to Atlanta, and they also moved on from Jaylen Brown, let him move on as well. So both middle linebacker positions were now open. Zach Cunningham, it takes one, and once again, normally the negative light that he was cast during the end of the season and tenure with the Texans is something that would extremely concern me. But it is the Texans, and nobody has wanted to play for the Texans. Hopkins got out. Watson, I guess, got out. I don't know how that's all going to plan out, but people didn't want to be there. I have a feeling Cunningham was very vocal about not wanting to be there, about being on a team that is losing games constantly. So I think that he's going to be a guy that's flying under the radar entering the season due to the tumultuous 2021 season that he had. Don't let that scare you away. At age 27, Zach Cunningham still has a lot of good football to play, and he's going to be leading that Tennessee Titans defense. Once again, without knowing the scheme, 6.5 tackles a game. I'm expecting an 8 to 10 tackle average for this guy all season long. Now, my player to watch is Kevin Byard, safety. This player is more like a player that you need to trade for. It's a really solid safety that not only has a nice floor, but a very impressive ceiling as well. He makes big plays. 5 picks last year, 23 interceptions in the last 5 years. On top of that, Kevin has never missed a game. Now, hopefully they do a little bit more than what the Burger King store gave for that guy that hasn't missed a day of work in 27 years. I think they gave him like a couple pins and a Starbucks cup. I think that they're doing a little bit better with Kevin. Maybe his contract's a little bit solider. But he's never missed a game in 6 years. And he's been a top 20 safety each of the last 4 years, including last year, safety number 6, and number 2 safety in the league in 2017. He's consistent. And he has value that may be lower due to lack of name recognition. Did you know who Kevin Byard was before I started talking about him? Because he's good, and he's consistent, and he has never missed a game. Now, I'm going to knock on wood. I pray that I did not jinx this guy because I love watching him play. He's really impressive, and he's a solid standout safety for the Tennessee Titans. So that's it. That is the AFC South breakouts, busts, and players to watch. Now, once again, I talked about a little bit at the beginning of your this podcast is, one, make sure you listen to the Fat Boys Dynasty podcast that is on Tuesdays, and 2, the Flex, which will release Thursday mornings. But the other thing is that understand positional scarcity. Understand the value in which your players matter. When you have to draft 3 of them and start 3 of them, where's your depth on that? Are they at the top end? Are they at the bottom end? Which one can you afford to have more mixed in or bottom end ones versus which ones would you much rather have at the top of that spectrum? Go to your websites, do a little math, pull out your cell phone with a calculator and just kind of figure some stuff out. It will open your eyes and create new strategies in your head that you never knew existed before. So with that being said, we'll see you guys next week. We are into July. It's exciting. It's time to get ready for these fantasy drafts. I'm pumped. I'm sure you're pumped. Once again, if you have questions, concerns, hit us up on Facebook. Hit us up on Instagram and Twitter. We have an army of people that are willing to help answer some of your guys' questions that you might have. You know, draft this guy or that guy. Why are you higher on this guy? Yada, yada, yada. Send the questions. We'll answer them. If you have IDP questions, make sure you ask for Iceberg when you're texting the message in. That way I get it and I'll respond back to you guys. So we'll have a good night. We'll see you next week.
This podcast has been presented by the Fantasyholics Podcast Network.